So this is my synthesis for the foundations of reading. Essentially, reading, and therefore the path to becoming an effective reader, is broken down into 5 major categories, of which their components are all interrelated. These components then work together in order to make up balanced literacy for the reader, but we'll get into that later. First of all, we're going to explore the 5 major categories of reading, which are called the Big Five. The first of the Big Five is phonological awareness. This is the awareness of language before reading and writing ever even happen. It is essentially the umbrella term that covers many skills that require the analysis and the manipulation of the sounds in spoken language. Since we mentioned that this is an umbrella term, there has to be things under it. So moving from this, we can look at the most complex skill set of phonological awareness, which is phonemic awareness. This is the understanding that spoken words are made up of individual sounds or phonemes. Phoneme is also under the umbrella of phonological awareness, and a phoneme is just the smallest building block for spoken words. For example, the word cat is made up of 3 phonemes, k, a, t. 3 different sounds, 3 different phonemes making up one word. Finally, under the umbrella of phonological awareness is phonics. Phonics is a study of phonemes and the letter symbols used to represent the sounds in reading and writing. Phonics leads us into the next of our Big Five, since it is also a category, which shows us our first example of how interrelated all these concepts will be. Phonics can be taught in 5 different ways: synthetic, analytical, embedded, analogy, and teaching phonics through spelling. Any of these 5 can be used throughout phonics instruction, and exposing students to a balanced and wide variety of these methods is most beneficial. Fluency is the next of the Big Five components of reading. Fluency is not the reader's ability to just read words correctly at a fast pace, but more so making sure to combine the elements of reading quickly, accurately, expressively, and with comprehension. This is a critical component of skilled reading. There are 6 dimensions of fluency, and having these skills helps increase how fluent a reader is. Pausing is the use of punctuation to guide the voice, or making sure to take adequate time to pause at the end of a sentence. For example, there was a comma in the middle of this last sentence, so I took a pause in order to emphasize and show the structure of the sentence with the comma. Just like writing, you don't want the way that you read to sound like you are reading off one long run-on sentence. Intonation is the varying of the tone of voice to show the meaning of the text. For example, with my student during the writing class last semester, we practiced how sentences may sound different depending on the punctuation that's at the end of them. The next component of fluency is stress, or placing certain emphasis on certain words to reflect meaning and/or the structure of the sentence. Phrasing is making meaningful groups of words fit into chunks together as you read them. Rate is moving through the text at appropriate speed. And finally, integration is the consistent usage of reading actions such as pausing, phrasing, intonation, stress, and rate in a seamless way. Now, using all 6 of the dimensions of fluency, we can now evaluate our 3 main factors that influence how fluent a reader might be when they get to your classroom. The first is language knowledge. Obviously, someone whose first language is English will be more fluent than an ELL. The second factor is background knowledge. For example, my student and I worked with this semester love monsters, so he picked out all the level books that had to do with monsters, and his reading fluency went up because he was so much more engaged with the text. The third and final factor is word identification skills, or how familiar they are with the vocabulary. Even skilled readers may not be fluent when faced with unfamiliar technical words or concepts. For example, as you can hear me reading off the script, I'm obviously a fluent reader. At my age and my skill level, this is great. But if you're giving me an organic chemistry textbook, I might not sound so fluent because I'm not going to have the word identification skills that I normally have. Vocabulary is the next component of the Big Five. These are the words that students know, recognize, read, or use. Vocabulary is super important for 2 reasons. Reading increases word knowledge, and a rich vocabulary increases reading comprehension. There are 4 types of vocabulary. We have speaking, listening, which will be our largest bank, reading vocabulary, and writing vocabulary. Each one's function lies in the name. All of these can be used and taught through direct and indirect exposures to the words. The final component of the Big Five is text comprehension. Comprehension is reading. That is the way that readers interact and process the symbols and words from the text in a meaningful way. Comprehension lies on a continuum going from literal to interpretive to evaluative. There are 2 huge categories of factors affecting textual comprehension. Text factors, such as the genre of the text structure, or text features, can alter how a reader comprehends the text. For example, if a student has not been introduced to dialogue yet, a novel that contains lots of dialogue and quotation marks may be confusing for them to comprehend until they are taught those features of the text. The other category is reader factors such as background knowledge, motivation, and engagement. For example, in my placement, my kindergarten students love the Fly Guy novel series, so they're super engaged in reading those whenever I read those out loud, but when it comes to academic texts, they're a lot less engaged and willing to work on what's being comprehended as I'm reading it out loud to them. The other major component of text comprehension is systems of strategic actions. These are just the strategies that illustrate the thinking readers are engaged in while they engage with the text. The strategic actions within the text are summarizing, adjusting, and solving words. These all happen during the text reading. The next two work for after the text has been read. Thinking about the text is critiquing and analyzing, and thinking beyond the text are strategies such as inferring, predicting, synthesizing, and connecting. For example, we're using synthesizing and connecting in this project. It is also important to consider the before the reading too, like pre-teaching vocabulary or KWL charts that increase background knowledge. By using these before strategies, this ties into the reader factors of comprehension. When the students are more prepared for the text they're about to read and comprehend, it increases background knowledge, motivation, and most likely overall enjoyment. Now, all these components of the Big Five work and come together as a reader's skills develop, and it comes to our balanced literacy. Balanced literacy is a continuum that progresses from our high teacher support opportunities to participate in reading experiences to completely independent and low teacher support experiences. This aims at guiding students towards a lifetime of proficient reading. The highest support is shared reading or modeled reading. This is often used in my kindergarten placement since all the students just sat at the listening level and they engulf themselves in a language-rich experience as I read out loud to them. Next is shared reading. This is an interactive reading experience where the teacher models what a proficient reader looks like. Next up is an interactive reading, then leading into guided reading, like we did with our case study students this semester, until finally we get to our highest level of low teacher support, which is independent reading. This is like when we have it in the classroom and it's called dear time, when students drop everything and read. They read on their own comfortable independent reading level. All of these skills work together in order to progress students towards being independent and proficient readers who comprehend, decode, and utilize higher order thinking skills all in one. Our job as teachers is to streamline students along this continuum in hopes that these skills not only develop but refine themselves as they learn in your classroom.